Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gary Connor. I have 12:30, so we're going to get started. So we're going to talk a little bit about 5S today. This is the second in a series of webinars, and by my count, there's about 150 tools in the lean manufacturing and Six Sigma toolboxes. So my guess is we may be doing a few of these, and I hope you join us for all of them, and that we're trying to educate as many people as possible about world-class manufacturing techniques, and not just manufacturing, but how all this applies to service industries and governmental agencies. And so this segment is going to be talking about 5S, or workplace organization and standardization. And we got a couple of case studies to show you. I hope you enjoy. Feel free to chat, and even though I can't see the chat right now, we have people monitoring that, and we'll try to get an answer to any questions you might have as we go along. So if you're not familiar with Nevada Industry Excellence, here's a copy of our website, and you're free to go there and look at upcoming events and contact any one of us in our group. We have two teams, north and south, in Nevada, and a couple of pictures here. I'm down in the lower right-hand corner. My name is Gary Connor. I just joined Nevada Industry Excellence in May, and real excited to be a part of the team. We also have a southern team, including Terry Culp down south in Las Vegas. And so you're free to contact any of these folks, and they can help you put together a strategic plan for moving your organization forward. Here's a couple of folks that we've worked with. You may recognize some of these names. And with that, we're going to get started. I always start my workshops talking about the fact that there's so many forms of waste in the manufacturing and administrative processes in companies, regardless of what your service or product is that you're selling. And I liken it to barnacles. So just if you've not been to one of our workshops or webinars before, just realize that when I talk about barnacles, it's to represent all the different forms of waste that each one on its own may not mean very much or amount to much, but to the shipping industry, it is a $1.4 billion problem that they have to take care of year after year. They have to scrape the barnacles off the hull of their ships, or they end up spending 40% more fuel, expending fuel costs. And so when we do value stream mapping and 5S and setup reduction and all the other tools that are in the lean manufacturing toolbox, what we're doing is removing the friction and drag in an organization, which I really like to think of as barnacles. So the definition that the MEP, Manufacturing Extension Partnership, has adopted to define lean is that lean is a systematic approach to identify and eliminate waste, and 5S is one of those tools, one of the systematic tools that we use, and it's usually one that we use early on. In fact, if you hear noise in the background, it's because in the other room, I'm at a company in Carson City, Nevada. In the other room, there's a team working on 5S right now. So it's one of the first tools, and one of the ones that has the greatest impact on morale, safety, and productivity that you can apply. So we'll use that definition of lean if that's okay. And let's talk a little bit about why we need 5S, first of all, and should we feel bad about workplace organization. We tend to resist that. If somebody suggests that we might reorganize our toolbox or our desk or our work area, we tend to resist that. But when you think about going into Walmart or Target or any other store, they have lines drawn on the pavement that show us where we should park our car, and nobody really takes offense at that. It's not an insult to our intelligence that they have drawn lines on the ground, and we see that as a good thing. It saves us getting door dents and damage to our vehicle. It's safer. It makes it more productive to get in and out. If they had no lines drawn on the pavement, it's no telling how long it would take you to get in and out of the parking lot. So 5S is really just about that. It's about organizing things so that there's a systematic way of producing either the service or the product and not causing a lot of stops and starts along the way and making ourselves more productive. And yet, we still, human nature being what it is, we still tend to resist that. So we really need to change our culture and our mindset, our paradigm about why we need organization in the workplace, whether it's our desk or our toolbox, and we shouldn't feel bad about workplace organization. Now, this is kind of the house of lean that we use to kind of symbolize the key tools in like I said before, there's probably 150, 160 tools in the Lean Manufacturing Toolbox, but these are the fundamental tools that apply to almost universally to every organization that we go visit. And 5S is one of those foundational tools, and that's why it's in the lower left-hand corner. Everything is built upon that kind of technique of making sure that things are well organized and systematized. So we're going to talk about that tool today. And there are 5 steps in the 5S system if you're not familiar with that. The first step is sort, which is to remove from the workplace everything that you don't need immediate access to. You might need it this month, but you may not need it today or this week. So maybe it ought to be somewhere close, but not necessarily in the direct flow of material or services. So we'll talk about each one of these in order, and we'll also show you some case studies and examples, photographs before and after and during from some pretty remarkable 5S projects that we've had a part in facilitating. So let's start with this little game here. I'm going to show you a set of numbers, and I want you to count in order the numbers 1 to 50, find 1, and then find 2, then find 3, and so forth, and up to 50. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do this, and you can chat in the number that you get. And beginning right now, I want you to find the numbers 1 through 50. That's 10 seconds. $20 seconds. So how many numbers did you find? Let's just do a little reality check here. Go ahead and chat in. How many numbers did you find from 1 to... Somebody found 5. That's good. It's not uncommon that we have somebody find 1 or 2. And so if we were to use the lowest number as the score for the entire group, then it's a pretty low number. I see somebody's being honest and saying they only found 3. That's good. So the first step in sorting out the process, sorting out the things that don't need to be on that page, let's go back and sort out all the numbers that are above 50, because there were some 90s and 80s. There were some letters in there. Let's just go back and take a look. There was some spilled milk and pencils and calculators and everything else. Let's eliminate things that are not numbers and sort out all the numbers above 50. And we'll give you another chance to do this, and we'll just give you another 30 seconds. So go ahead. So my guess is that you found a few more, so we've sorted out what we don't need, but now we want to straighten up what we do need. And so by aligning them, instead of having them be crooked and upside down and backwards, by aligning them, by straightening them, it gets a little bit better. And if I were to give you another 30 seconds, you'd probably find 6 or 8 or 12. But still, it's kind of hard to find because they're not organized. So we're going to shine this. We're going to straighten and shine now, organize them by rank, put them in a position that would be easy to put them back if we had to take them out or move them. Make sure that it's easy to reorganize, and maybe even make them a common color would be another benefit. Now everybody could find everything from 1 to 50, and it's easy to find one that's missing, like number 2 is not there. So it makes it a lot easier to organize. Now we need to standardize to make sure that it doesn't go back and we slip and the benefits are evaporated. So we want to simplify. We want to document a plan and then execute that plan, develop best practices so everybody kind of does it the same way. And this applies to services and products, the manufacture or delivery of services. And we want to design those products and services that really foster a method to be able to have a uniform way of delivery, and maybe even the manufacturer. So standardization is the development of standard operating procedures or best practices, and we want to do that even with our 5S program. So now things are a little bit more standardized, and the toughest S, the last S, after you sort out what you don't need and straighten up what you do need, and after you shine it and standardize it, the tough part is making sure that those gains aren't evaporated. So we want to change behaviors, make it very hard to go back to the old method, because after 6 months, if it's back to this, there's 2 numbers missing here, and you'd be hard pressed to find them. But if I have built a process that makes them very visible if they're gone or if they're out of place, the number 7 and the number 18 in this case, it's very obvious to everybody whether or not everything is in its place, and that's really what it's going to take to sustain. So we're going to actually show you some real-life examples of this, and one of the questions I often get is, how long does this take? Is this a very long, tedious process? And here's an example of a client we worked with in Reno a few years ago, and we only had one day. We had a day to do the training and to do a little mini 5S project. And so this was a maintenance guy's toolbox, and when I sent him off to find a servo, it took him about 12 minutes to do that. And so we recognized that if he was going to find anything within 30 seconds, which is what we refer to as a process that's been 5S to the degree it needs to be, if you can find anything within 30 seconds, it's probably pretty well organized. That relates to your filing system on your computer or to your toolbox in this case. So in one day, we transformed this gentleman's toolbox so that now all the product that might be related to hydraulics or plumbing or electricity or mechanical devices were not only separated and organized, but also labeled. And so that took a full day, and we couldn't change the world, but we did change this gentleman's toolbox, and his working life did become a little bit more enjoyable, I'm sure. And then you got to ask yourself the question, could this be your garage? This doesn't just apply to work, it also applies to home. So we did a project in Salem, Oregon last year, and while this was a little 5,000 square foot shop, it was very much like a garage shop. And I looked at this shelf and I thought, wow, I've been in a lot of people's garages that look exactly like this. So we went down to, you might say Walmart. It was a Fred Meyer store, but we got some little plastic bins and we labeled them A to Z, and everything that was on this shelf got separated and put into these bins, these little pull drawers. And I actually use this in my own home. And if my kids or grandkids want some balloons, they know it's going to be in B. And if they need gloves to pull weeds, they know it's going to be in G. And why not this instead of this? Life doesn't have to be hard. We can make it so much easier on ourselves by organization. So that's just a quick example of how you might even apply this at home or in your garage. And so let's now talk a little bit about the project steps. When we do a 5S project, I would actually add another S to the 5S's, and that would be a workplace scan. And that's what we just did today at this company here in Carson City. We went out and performed a workplace scan. We went out and looked at the area, took pictures, we documented the current condition, and they are in the next hour or so now going to go out and start their sorting process. But let's talk about the workplace scan and look at some before and after pictures. If you were a part of this team, what would you see in their workplace scan? Well, we would follow the operator to see how far it takes, how far he or she has to walk to accomplish the tasks necessary to either deliver the product or service. And sometimes these spaghetti diagrams end up equaling miles of travel a day. And so the area map is one of those workplace scan activities. This is a food processing manufacturer. They actually make equipment for canneries. And so by their own admission, 2 operators shared this little room, and they said it's looked like this for the last 16 years by their own admission. So we took a picture, and you notice everything's painted old Army green, and that's typical of 1960s, 1970s manufacturing, they painted things dark gray or dark green or dark brown to kind of hide the dirt. We want to actually see the dirt so we can find the source of the contamination. So this is a before picture and another view of their little tool room. And this is a view inside their tool room, and it's hard to see, but right over here on the right-hand side is their microwave where they cook their lunch, and right on top of that microwave are some deadly chemicals. So there were some safety-related issues to deal with here, as well as inefficiency and quality-related issues, because there were some very expensive tooling and tool holders that were in a position that could have easily been damaged. So that was a before condition. We did a workplace diagnostic checklist, and they didn't score very highly on that, obviously. This is one of the tools we do during our workplace scan. So we went in and we started to shine. Actually, one little piece of trivia for you is that in the first go-around, when you're first doing 5S, you sort out what you don't need, and oftentimes it's a requirement to get things cleaned up before you straighten them up. So we did a little shining, and I looked like a chimney sweep when we were done with this, because you got to get dirty to get something clean. So we took everything out on 13 pallets, put it in the parking lot, and started scrubbing and repainting. And this time we painted it bright white, and now the area looks like this, more like a doctor's office than a machine shop. But everything is identified, everything's clean, and everything's in its place and labeled. So very much a contrast to the before picture. But we don't want this to go back to the way it was before, so we had to put something in to sustain this and build a standard to make sure that people knew what the expectation was. So we used the diagnostic checklist to go through again, and there were still opportunities for improvement, which showed up in red. But we built a project display board with both the before and after audit checklist. We had some before and after pictures, and we posted that in the work area so that we never want to go back to the way it was before and have to do a spring cleaning event every year. So this is the expectation on the right-hand side. The spaghetti diagram or workflow diagram is up in the upper left-hand corner. We look for all the opportunities related to quality, safety, efficiency, the maintenance of the equipment, whether they had more inventory in terms of tools than they needed, and whether there was any outdated information, and we made a list of those things.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
How did the maintenance guys felt about you changing their home, per se?
Well, that's a very good question, and here's the way I put it to our workshops: is we're going into somebody else's sandbox, and I built my son a 20-foot square sandbox when he was 4 years old, and he'd go out and get it all organized the way he wanted, and then my 2-year-old granddaughter would come over to visit and rearrange his sandbox, and he was not happy about that. And that's the kind of mindset we need to take when we go out to somebody else's work area. We're going into their sandbox, and we're going to be making suggestions for changes. So the only way that we're going to get their engagement is to seek their input and their ideas. And so it's got to be in their best interest, and it's got to make their life better. And so I think both that maintenance guy and those two machinists who shared that tool room recognized this was making their life easier and better, and it is in their best interest. So I think that's the way you get their engagement. You gotta look at it from their viewpoint, and of course there's always going to be a little bit of resistance, but that's why we start small and and involve them in the process. You can't do it to them; you got to do it with them. Terrific question. Any other questions? Did I answer that for you?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Gary, I have a question. I would assume before you just went into their workplace, you gathered the employees in and did some education on this prior to. Absolutely, and that's what we just did this morning here at the company in Carson City. They did a kind of a 5S overview, and of course it's always easier to see somebody else's warts than your own, and so we always show a couple of case studies just like I'm showing here from other companies, and they see it because it's not their own area, and then they're
you kind of soften the ground a little bit, and when you're going out to their area, they're a little more receptive to the fact that maybe there are opportunities, and maybe I'm not exactly perfect, and they're a little more willing to look in the mirror. So let me put you to work and do a workplace scan. What do you see in this picture? This is a company up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and it was a machine shop. This happened to be a horizontal boring machine. And what you might notice is every flat surface became a catch-all, and that's generally what happens to shelves and bins and drawers. Is every open surface becomes a place to store things temporarily, but then it becomes just part of the furniture. So this area here, if we opened up the cabinets, the gentleman that was running this particular operation had to make about a 400-foot journey to the tool room when he needed a new drill bit or a different size drill bit. So instead of taking it back, he would just put it in his cabinet and say, well, you know, I might need that again, I'll keep that. But each of these drill bits is probably worth about $125, and nobody else can use it because he's got it. So he was squirreling away the tooling in an effort to try to save steps, which is admirable, but in the process, nobody else had access to those tools. And in fact, when we showed this particular photograph in the management steering committee meeting, the vice president of manufacturing pointed out that there was a $600 mag drill that they've been looking for the last 6 months. So I didn't mean to put the guy under any undue pressure, but it was something that nobody knew existed anymore. They thought they had lost it. And so we have an obligation to work with these people, not to make them feel bad, obviously, but we got to get them involved to see what do you really need in the area, and what needs to be in an area you have access to, but is not in the immediate flow of the product or the service. So we applied sort, and it took I think about 11 pallets of material to be removed out of the area so that we could actually see the floor and start straightening things up. So the sorting out process, all of this material you'll see is actually with a yellow tag. This process is often called the red tag process, but it was taken to a red tag holding area where it wasn't just given away or identified as scrap. We had to make a case to either bring it back or to move it to a new location. So that sorting out process is what you see here. And then we started setting things in order, and that's where we took two of the cabinets off the top of this bench and actually provided the operator a nice, smooth UHMW working surface and started making a shadow board for all the tools that he did need in his area. And you'll notice that we use a technique where we use sloped surfaces because if it's a flat surface, it'll become a catch-all again. And where it's a sloped surface, in this case, holes drilled out to the uniform size of the tool that fits in there, nothing else will sit there. So it becomes easier to access, easier to see, and also avoids the chance of other things ending up there without really having a place. So we want to make things obvious where they belong, and that includes the use of lines and shadow boards and signage and labels. So here's an example of that, and you see some more examples of the sloped surface where the parts are actually presented in a more ergonomic fashion, but it does prevent the collection of non-essential items. So then we also, of course, shine and clean, and so this is what the area looked like after the Kaizen team was done. And I will mention that the guy that ran this area, his name was Mike, and I suggested to Mike that he could take his toolbox home. He wasn't ready to do that. He said, I need my toolbox. And we responded that, well, we watched for 3 days, and we put everything on this board, the shadow board that you need and that you used in those 3 days, and so really you probably don't really need your toolbox. But he wasn't ready to let it go, and so it was a bit of a security blanket. And again, we're doing this with people, not to them. And so we let Mike have his toolbox, and it still may be there, but you got to involve the people. But certainly his work area went from this to this, and it's obviously much more ergonomically friendly for him. He's got everything he needs within arm's reach. And And we did let him keep his toolbox, at least for now. Someday he may come to the realization that he doesn't really need it, and I hope that's the case. The next step is to standardize or to build it into the work day so that you don't have to have an end-of-the-week cleanup party or a spring cleaning event. And so standardization builds documentation and best practices so that everybody understands what their role is and when something needs to be done, and that there's a checklist, and it will help you develop a program where your operation maintains itself. So here's a technique we call transparency, where a lot of times cabinet doors and drawers are taken off, the fronts are taken off, so you can actually see what's in there, and that helps to build the sustainment and the standard policy and standard procedure. As you go from work center to work center, everybody's procedures are the same, and cabinets are done away with, drawers that are collection areas are eliminated. Here's another example of that technique. It's easy to see when things are getting low. It's easy to see when things are out of place, and everything's identified, and nothing belongs there that isn't labeled. One of the standardization charts we use describes what the standard condition should be. One pair of scissors in this case, on a shadow board. The responsibility is that of the operator, and so forth. You can see the set in order, and the shine standard condition is also defined. And it's like doing dishes at home. If it's everybody's job, it's nobody's job. But if there's a schedule that says on Friday, Gary is responsible for doing the dishes, then it's more likely to happen. So you need a plan, and then you need to execute the plan, and that's really what standardization is all about. A lot of times things are color-coded. You want to make sure that there's a best practice in that regard too. So there's color conventions, you might say, that say if it's white, then it represents this. If it's yellow, it represents that. If it's black and yellow stripes, it's a hazard area, and so forth. You want to make sure that there's a uniformity of color coding throughout the organization. Here's just another example of a shine plan, where it might be Billy Bob's responsibility to clean the floors in Zone A every evening, and the materials he's going to need are dust pans and brooms and so forth. So again, it's not left to chance, and we're better able to plan and maintain and sustain. So let's all agree, I think we can all agree, it seems obvious to do this in the shop. Manufacturing is going to be much more smoother, much safer. It's going to make a greater impression on the customer when they come through for tours. It just seems so obvious in the shop. But what about the office? Let's talk about the office for a moment. And hopefully nobody's office looks like this, but I have seen some that approach this. And there's a company we worked with in Pennsylvania, and this is Eric's office before, and it's not terrible. It was a little tough for somebody else to sit down at his desk and know where things were, but now Eric's office looks like this, and he sits next to Stephanie, whose office used to look like this, and now Stephanie's desk looks like this, and she sits right next to Eric, and the workflow, which used to be miles and miles a week, is now, I think, 35 feet per work order as it goes through their office. And so this applies in administrative processes just as much as it does in traditional manufacturing processes. And I thought I would share a case study with you that it also applies to your computer. So we did a project for a nonprofit organization in Oregon called Job Growers, and their mission is to assist displaced workers, single moms that might just be coming into the workforce, single parent into the workforce for the first time, displaced loggers, like I said, mill workers that some industries in Oregon were kind of suffering. So their job was to help them get training and get a bus pass if they needed it to get to class, get books, get work shoes. And so their 5S charter included a way to organize their management of their filing system on their computers, because when someone came in to ask for assistance, there was no standard method. They could go to any one of 5 satellite operations because they were scattered around 5 cities in a tri-county area. It was hard to find what you needed. Files would get lost. If people moved from one county to another, they would have to recreate files from scratch. There was unnecessary searching through the computer and so forth. They turned this problem statement into an objective statement, which looks like this. They want to be able to find anything within 30 seconds. And they want to be able to find anything within 3 clicks of the mouse. So 5S applied to their computer system meant they had to sort out unnecessary files, just like a manufacturing environment would sort out unnecessary tools and inventory. And it had to be easy to use, or else nobody would use it. So we had to define first what is the scope of this project, and it happened to be what they called their Z drive, which was something all the satellite operations used and accessed. We were still allowing people to have their personal PC with some filing systems that they maintained, but when it applied to a shared drive, everybody had to use kind of a common best practice. So the first step was to do what we call an AEIOU diagram or analysis. And this may be a little bit hard to see. It's a bit of an eye chart. I apologize. But we listed all the people in the process, and we listed them again across the top, and all the file systems that they needed access to. And so, for the example, the director needed access some of the time, which would be monthly, to the administrative files, but she needed daily access to the board of director files. And so the AEIOU stands for, is it absolutely important? Do I need it daily? Is it especially important? I need it weekly. Is it important, ordinary, or unimportant? I don't even need access to it at all. And it really helped us define how those files should be set up and who should have access to them and who should be able to change them. And so we flow charted out the entire process of their Z drive and started to put things into a red tag area where they didn't need to be existing in their current area. And so this took a little bit of assistance from their IT department. But we eliminated a lot of files that they said were really outdated and no longer necessary. And we decided that they would have 5 doors, and this would be the first level. So if you imagine going into an office building, and if you were going into the department called governance, you would go through that door. That's the first level. But behind governance, there would be, in this case, 6 doors. And within governance, if I was looking for legal documentation, I could go through that door, and that would be my 3rd click, and that would be as many clicks as I needed to find the file I was looking for. So if behind grants, there was 2 doors, every one of these the main 5 doors had their sub-levels, but there was never more than 3 clicks to get to any file that you needed. So the 5S, sorting out, straightening up, and shining applied to this filing system within their computer, just like it does in an office environment or a manufacturing environment. So here was a couple of tools they used to help visualize their changes, where it used to be located and where it's located now. Probably means nothing to you, but it meant something to them. And there was some new authority protocols, so not just everybody could go in and set up a new file. If you needed to recommend a new file, that had to go to the proper group or authority who had access to do that. And everybody had to kind of play by the same rules, so we set up what we called rules of engagement. Otherwise, we were going to go back and have multiple files stored in multiple locations, and it wouldn't have been sustained. So let me just stop there for one more moment and ask if there's any questions relative to that.
I have one, Gary.
Sure, go ahead.
I guess looking at your presentation here, the overarching question for me is, how did you come to be in these facilities to do this work?
The Job Grower facility, the nonprofit organization, are you talking about?
Yeah, no. Some of these, like some of the shops that you showed us. How did you come to be there in the first place? I mean, how was the management? They contacted you and they gave you some guidelines, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I have a chance to speak at trade shows and write a couple of trade journal articles. And now that I work for Nevada Industry Excellence, we're out visiting companies all the time and doing assessments. And by the way, we do, free assessments if anybody's interested. And there's a manufacturing extension partnership virtually in every state. So if you're not in Nevada, you can, make contact with us, and we will put you in contact with the people who can help. But we get invited to visit companies to find out what can we do to move them to the next level of performance. And oftentimes that begins with a 5S project because there's just an exceptional need to improve their workplace organization. Great question.
Because, I have done some, I've read some of your books, and I have applied some of those ideas at work, doing some of the Kaizen projects here in our own company, and we have had great results, but it's kind of on my own,
Yeah.
Finding resources for this, they're rarely available. It's never easy.
Yeah, we do project work all the time, and we engage with clients all the time, and that's what I'm doing today. We're working with a client here in Carson City on a 5S project, and it's one of the lowest hanging fruits on the tree. There's so much money to be saved in setup reduction and in 5S and the application of some of these fundamental tools. So, yeah, we're happy to talk to anybody about doing project work, and we'll give you our contact information at the end of this presentation, and Lorraine can maybe pass that along by way of email as well, one of our team members down in Las Vegas. Any other questions relative to 5S in that case study I just covered? So the last S is obviously the most difficult S. The first four kind of relate to getting out and getting dirty in order to get things clean. But once you got them cleaned up, you don't want that to evaporate. And so sustaining is probably where we spend the greatest amount of time with the team, auditing and following up and making sure that the hard work that they've done isn't going to evaporate. So it takes a new paradigm. It takes some new thinking if you're going to sustain. So most people who are optimists by nature would look at this condition and say, well, the glass is half full. Pessimists, on the other hand, would say the glass is half empty. We need to have our team look at this and say, maybe the glass is too big. And that's just a different way of looking at things, and we need that kind of thinking. We need new paradigms. We need to look at our work centers and ask why every day. And just because we do a 5S event today doesn't mean we're done. We need to look at it again tomorrow and ask, why do we do it this way? Is this the best way of doing it? Is this the only way of doing it? Is this the way Toyota would do it? Is this the way Harley Davidson or John Deere would do it? And we need to challenge ourselves because we've got competition who is asking themselves those questions every day. And if we're not going to be able to compete. So the diagnostic checklist is one of the tools that we use to make sure that the hard work and effort that we put into this thing doesn't evaporate. And so if you want a copy of this diagnostic checklist, we'll make sure that we'll email you a copy. Just let Lorraine know, and or myself, and we will get you a copy out by way of an email. And you can put your numbers in here and test your own level of compliance. And it's also nice on your workplace diagnostic checklist and on your project board to put some sort of a visual representation of how you're doing. Let's say you set a goal in the green line here, but in actuality, the condition is really represented by the red line. It shows where the opportunities lie. And you probably don't want to be so aggressive to say we have to be a 5 straight out of the gate. Maybe you set a goal of achieving a 3 the first pass and the 4 a month later. And then how do you apply this universally throughout your organization? It's hard to do this on a massive scale. So generally what we do is, and it kind of relates back to the question I just received there, we start small. We go to a small target area that we can accomplish in a day or two, and we build a model, an example for the rest of the facility in the organization so that you can bring people over and show them how the sort works, show them how things are straightened up, and show the difference between dirty and clean. and show how the best practices and standard operating procedures really help sustain. So build that model, build that case study of your own so that you don't have to go outside so much to rely on outside resources, but you're building that structure within your own organization. It might require some help on the first go around, and we're happy to provide that service, and that's what we're doing here today. But the team is actually training themselves today based on a 5S project that we did about a month ago. So here's another example of a wood manufacturing plant in southern Oregon, in Roseburg, and they have project display boards that they huddle around every day, and part of the sustainment is you have what we call 5S stand-up meetings that cover one of the S's maybe every week, or if necessary every day, but just not a long drawn-out meeting, but just a little 5-minute reminder of we need to sort things out, we need to clean things up. I don't know too many lumber mills that look like this. You don't see anything on the floor. This is probably the most pristine manufacturing plant I've ever seen in terms of the wood industry, but it's not by accident. They work at it, and they struggle too, but they are not going to let go of this. Once they got into this condition, they talk about whenever they see a moving away from the standard, they bring it back to their attention, and they have a stand-up meeting to talk about where the gaps are. Here's a picture, and I don't know if Don Begno might be on this webinar with us today, but Don Begno down in Lafayette, Louisiana, has one of the nicest shops I've ever seen in terms of a sheet metal shop, and he actually has a 3D printer that he printed a copy of every machine in his plant, and the team gets around and talks about not only 5S, but material flow and all the other lean techniques, and they talk about it every day. And if you've ever been in a welding shop, I would venture to say it doesn't look like this. This is a welding booth, and I can guarantee you this guy didn't straighten this up just because he knew I was coming. This welding booth looks like this every day, and I mean it's a testament to that guy's hard work and Don Begno's dedication to make sure that he's setting the standard by which all other companies are measured. Whenever I need to show a welding department what 5S looks like, I always pull this picture out because it is an absolute perfect example of what 5S should look like in a welding shop. Another part of the sustainment system is to make sure people have the 10,000-foot view. And 5S on this target diagram here is really in the center for a reason. It's very hard to do the rest of these things well if you don't do 5S well. You can't have a very safe working environment if your work environment is dirty. You can't demonstrate quality if your working environment is disorganized and customers come through. The first impression is pretty important. So 5S is in the center of this target because it really supports, and it is a fundamental and a foundational tool that allows you to do the rest of these and apply the rest of these techniques. It's going to be very difficult to apply TPM, total productive maintenance, and some of the other total quality management tools and just-in-time or lean or whatever you want to call it without having 5S disciplines well in place and well sustained. So, as I mentioned, you can't boil the ocean and you can't do it all in one motion. So this is an example of a client we worked with in Reno a few years ago, and they were only able to do a small project in the shipping department in January of the year we were there, I think 2009, and they realized they were going to have to divide their shop into 12 quadrants, and every month they were going to take on another quadrant. And they were a small operation, I think a $2.5 million operation. So it was not going to be something that was going to happen overnight. They were already limited in their resources that they could apply to this, but at least they had a plan. And it's like getting married or going on vacation. You got to set a date. You can always move the date, but if you don't set that date, it's likely that it's not going to happen. So they put together a plan and they executed it, and that's what it takes in order to sustain. So you might be in a position of saying, well, hey, how do I find out more about 5S? How do I find out more about other lean techniques? And so we're going to offer future webinars. Next time I'd like to offer one on value stream mapping, and particularly value stream mapping for job shops and make-to-order environments. We're going to talk about setup reduction. We're going to talk about lean as it applies to service industries. We have a person on staff that worked at Hertz. And so how do you apply this in a car rental, or car sales agency, airline agency? What these service industries are benefiting from this as much as manufacturing. We have a person on staff who is a food industry expert. We're going to apply this lean manufacturing to the office environment. So about 50% of the work we do now includes elements of the administrative processes, not just the shop. And I've also had a chance to work with the Alberta government in Canada for the last 3 years in the Prime Minister's office. So this all applies to everything we do every day. So we develop customized training and consulting. Feel free to call us for a free assessment. We can either do that over the phone or webinar or even in person. And I'm hopefully going to put together a webinar for the first Friday of next month related to value stream mapping for job shops. We have an upcoming event, special event on October 9th, the Sierra Regional Manufacturers Conference, and some great topics, including some more case studies about lean manufacturing. I'm going to have a chance to present that, but there's also a lot of other topics that you're going to find very interesting, talking about the new normal and recovering from this recession that we found ourselves in these past few years. So we have a keynote speaker, Ian Hill, which I've heard is going to be a fantastic presentation. So get signed up for that, and you can register by contacting Lorraine or myself or anybody in the Nevada Industry Excellence team. We're going to share some information at that conference related to Nevada-based organizations and focus on Nevada-based companies that we worked with over the last few years, including one in Las Vegas by the name of VSR, and they make bases for the slot machine and gaming industry and among other products. And that's a very compelling story, and we're going to share that at the Manufacturers Conference. Visit our website, please. We've got a lean for the office coming up next week on Wednesday in Nevada. If you want to get registered for that, it's a hands-on simulation-based training. And then we got our 1-week lean leader course down in Las Vegas in October 14th. So I appreciate your participation, and I look forward to the next time we have a chance to have a webinar. I'm going to turn the microphones back on and just field any questions you might have. We can go back to any slide.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Are you going to be sending out the presentation, or can you make that available?
I think we could probably do that. Turn it into a PDF file and send it out. As long as there's no, let's see, I got to make sure there's no proprietary information on there from the companies, but I will try to genericize that and make that available, yes.
Question. Are any of the diagnostic templates going to be available through the Nevada IE website?
Yes, those are actually, you can actually download those from a number of sources on the internet, but we'll make sure that that's available to anybody that's on the webinar, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, we'll cut you loose for the day. I appreciate you joining us and look forward to next month having you all join us again.
Thank you.
Have a great day.